Hi, my name's John Cordy, and if this falls over we're going to have a problem, obviously. Today I wanted to just show you what I'm working with my pedal board and talk about some of the things that I've done stupidly in the past and got wrong, all that sort of stuff. And I'm also going to do some playing probably towards the end or in the middle to split it up. So first of all, I wanted to talk about what I perceive as the problem with pedal boards. Basically, I think most of us start off with an idea that we want to, have a pedal board that's going to do a certain job or a certain range of jobs, and we start to spec it out and we think, okay, I'm going to need these pedals, I'm going to organise it around a particular switcher or however you're going to do it, and at some point I'll be done with that pedal board and that's going to last me until whenever I'm bored of it. The problem as I see it is that basically most of us end up changing things quite often. I guess that's one of the kind of cool things about pedal boards, is you can switch stuff in and out all the time, but that basically makes it an unending project and also essentially a bottomless money pit. So I guess knowing that going into getting into pedal boards is probably worthwhile. It may not be the case for everyone, but certainly for me, I've spent the morning sort of looking at this and thinking about how much money I've got tied up in this, and it's something you might want to think about before you start going into the rabbit hole. So advice when you're starting your pedal board, I guess, would be to use a pedal board planner or something like that, or talk to a friend who's done this stuff before, because there's a lot of things that I've done stupidly in the past and potentially money wasted, and you end up with stuff which you aren't necessarily going to ever use. First things first, the pedal board itself. I know there's quite a lot of companies out there that will charge you lots of money for hardwood pedal boards and stuff, but as I see it, basically you're just dealing with something to stick your pedals to. So pedal train is for me what I use, relatively cheap. Harley Benton makes some stuff which is also perfectly usable, but things to think about is maybe clearance on the underside to mount your power devices and those sorts of things. Aside from that, basically your pedal board can be more or less anything. You see people making stuff out of chopping boards, people making stuff out of IKEA shelves and all sorts of stuff like that. There's no real reason that you'd have to spend sort of £400 or £600 on a pedal board, but there are companies that do it. Schmidt for example, Alder and Ash pedal boards. If you're into that sort of thing and that aesthetic and take a picture of your pedal board, maybe that's something you'd look into. But for me, it's just there to do a job. So Temple Audio also make pedal boards which are slightly more expensive but kind of functionally are useful, but Pedal Train for me is what I would use, or Harley Benton, just because it's not necessary to spend more unless you really want to. Something not worth skimping on if you're using Velcro is the Velcro. I nicked this off of Jake. I think this is from Screwfix, and if you can get some kind of decent dual lock tape, that works better than kind of cheaper Velcro. The problem with the cheap stuff is that the adhesive will pull off, and so particularly in warmer weather, you end up with pedals falling off and all that sort of stuff, and it just doesn't really do the job. So worth spending a little bit more on the Velcro if you want your pedals to stick on a little bit more firmly. Something that I used to get wrong all the time is, where are you mounting the pedal? So if you've got top mounted jacks, you want to mount it sort of on the rail so that your jacks can get through, and then if you've got middle mounted jacks, it's going to be in a slightly different position. But before you actually commit to sticking the pedals down, maybe think about whether they're positioned such that the jacks can get there cleanly. So as I say, I'm sort of basically hanging them on that rail, and the pedals and the jacks sort of sit flush with that. In the past I've got that wrong a lot. Another thing to think about is whether you're going to use a switching device. For me, I don't like to tap dance and do all that stuff. So there's things like the Carl Martin Octa Switch or the Gig Rig Quartermaster, or there's Harley Benton cheaper alternatives, or Joyo. But those are things that have been useful for me, because you can basically then set up loops where you're assigning pedals and not assigning pedals. Another really important thing to think about is powering your unit. So these are things that I've skimped on in the past, but at this point now I've kind of come round to the idea that you might as well just spend initially the money on a power supply that is going to grow potentially, or has potential to grow with your board. So I personally use on this board, I've got a Strymon Zoomer. I've just put a Strymon Ojai, or however you say it, R30 here, so that I can power potentially like an Iridium or an HX Stomp. If you skimp on the powering, not only can things end up being noisy, but as the pedal board kind of inevitably grows, I think it's useful to get a pedal power device which can also grow with the board potentially, should you need to. And that again is one of those kind of issues with the pedal board world. A Strymon Zoomer is quite a hefty investment, and also the Ojai is, you know, not cheap, and so even those two devices by themselves would set you back about the cost of like an HX Stomp or something like that, which potentially seems like not such a fun way to spend your money, if you get what I mean. Now, also important to think about kind of signal routing and placing things where you're going to be able to get them in and out. So for instance, this is where I enter my board signal wise. So you want some clearance there so that you can plug in and plug out at the end and start of a gig if you need to. In the past I've put those in stupid places, but now that I've learned that lesson, make sure you've got clearance to put yourself into the pedal board and also clearance to come out. So I come out here of this board, so the signal basically goes this way and then out through here. Think about whether you want some things within the switcher, some things without. So after this switcher I have a looper, the freeze and delay pedal, because the delay and reverb are in here. Potentially you might want that in a loop, but for me I always want these after the loops. The loops I'm going to be using for drives basically, and the free the flight time. So I've got plenty of clearance here. This is where I'm coming out of the board, so that's easy to get to. In the past I might have had an input somewhere around here which has been daft, and an output, you know, all kinds of random places. On this board I've kind of learned that lesson, so I've got plenty of clearance for the input, plenty of clearance for the output, and I can come out of here stereo if I want to, which is kind of a nice option. Another kind of cool thing that about this board, so you see on Instagram and stuff, people have these really tidy kind of pedal boards that are super neat and super compact. That's not so much what I was going for with this. I wanted more kind of space to be able to take things on and off. As you know, on this channel I kind of switch pedals quite a lot, and you know, for a video I might want to take the dude of the HRM off, so I wanted to be able to do that. But also I've got this kind of chunk of the pedal board here is my audition space, so at the moment I'm kind of playing around with the Ethos Overdrive. Here I could put the Strymon Iridium for example, or I could put my HX Stomp, or I could put a Revival drive. All of these things are possible. I've got it set up so basically this will be my spot where I can swap in or out pedals. At the moment this is in loop 3, and so I could try different drive pedals, or I can put at the end of my loop a device, you know, like the Iridium, like I said, or the Shiftline Twin, but basically leaving kind of space for your pedal board to evolve, if you like, or for you to try out different things, I think is a way that you can potentially save yourself the hassle of recreating a board kind of every time you want to try something out or take something off. So that's why this board is kind of spaced out, if you like. I can switch anything out here that I want to, and I've got plenty of extra power now that I've put the Strymon Ojai R30 in. I suggest that might be kind of a cool thing to try. It's also worth noting, I think, that some people end up running 2 pedal boards. If you do go down the switching route, you know, like I know people that have used a Gig Rig G2 for example. The thing is that this kind of ends up being quite an unwieldy pedal board, and so for smaller gigs oftentimes you'll hear people saying, I'm going to take a smaller pedal board, or I want a smaller pedal board that I can just take along to kind of smaller gigs or sessions. That's something that you might want to factor into your thinking when you initially start your build, or if you're getting into the world of pedalboard building. Basically you're going to have to factor in that if you do create this bigger board, probably you're going to also then create a need for a second board, potentially. That might not be the case for you and you might be able to avoid it. just saying that there are people out there that definitely end up doing that. And I don't know that it was always going to be in their plan. But for instance, that means that you've got to double up the power supplies, potentially pedals, another pedal board, and basically another whole rabbit hole of costs. So worth bearing that in mind. I have a second pedal board, for example. I have like a little, it might be a pedal train Metro or something like that. And on that, I think I've got a Harley Benton power supply on that. And generally I would take like one drive pedal, a Game Changer audio freeze pedal, and I might take like one delay pedal or something like that. But that's basically just to get me through smaller sessions or a jazz gig or something like that, where I don't necessarily need to take this, but just to say that that is a thing that happens for people. I still need to cable tie the power and stuff for this, so I'm going to keep in mind that this is going to be an audition space, so I probably won't cable tie some of that stuff. I might kind of label those leads as such. Yeah, cable tying stuff and keeping it all tidy is a good idea. And there might be some argument for, if you're gigging with it, creating labels and stuff that kind of point to what does what, because you don't want to be on a gig and then suddenly, inevitably, sometimes things don't work as you hoped they would, and trying to troubleshoot in the dark is not ideal. So that's something also to bear in mind. So I'll just play you through some tones and show you what I'm doing. At the moment I'm going out via the Iridium. So my clean tone will be that. Generally I would have a reverb on. The Nux or NUX Atlantic I've chosen because it has this delay built in as well. It's pretty aggressive. So yeah, at this end of the board I've got my freeze. And it's at this end of the board because I don't want it affected by the drives and stuff at the other end of the board, if that makes sense. Same as the looper. My freeze and my looper and my delay and reverb I don't want affected by kicking on a drive, so I stick it at the very end of the signal chain. And then at this end of the board, I've got the HRM and the Dude in the same loop, so that I can do kind of a really sustaining. I could also kick those on or off individually and have, you know, just the Dude. Or equally just the HRM. But basically I've got the Dude set up to kind of hammer the front of the HRM. For my lead tone. So then I've also got here the Brover drive from J-Rocket, which I'm using kind of as a more kind of mild tube screamer style. And then the flight time is always on here and is in switch number 4, and I can also freeze the delays if I want to with this kind of Mosky foot switch thing, whatever that is. So kind of useful and kind of fun, and a different kind of thing almost than what's going on with the looper, so I could have like a short delay if I was using a long loop, but that's kind of cool. So then paired with like and then I've got my audition slot, as I've spoken about, which is this Ethos overdrive at the moment. So yeah, that's how I've got my board set up at the moment. I think, as I've said, if there are some pedals here which will always be here, I think, for now anyway. The Freeze, the Ditto, the Atlantic Delay for now is going to be here for a while. The Dude and the HRM I don't see going anywhere anytime soon. The role of like the lower gain, I guess, the Tube Screamer kind of thing, I could replace with different bits and pieces, like maybe a Free the Tone SOV. I might switch that in occasionally, or I might switch in the Antares Tube Screamer. So that role is sort of up for grabs, you know, or changeable. And as I say, this is kind of an audition slot, or somewhere where I could stick the Iridium if I was going direct for a gig, or, you know, another kind of chunky overdrive, whether it's the Royal Overdrive or something like that. So that's the pedal board as I have it. As I say, my kind of warning with this stuff is it's kind of easy to spend quite a lot of money quite quickly, and you may find yourself kind of going down this rabbit hole. I think it's not a bad idea to build a board with the potential to expand, rather than, you know, buying the smallest thing that you could sensibly fit everything that you wanted on, that you want right this moment. I think it's worth getting a board which you can kind of grow over time if you want to, and power supplies that work with each other. That's why I've chosen the Strymon kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of what I've done wrong with pedal boards in the past. Certainly I'm not an expert on any of this. These are just some of the lessons that I've learned, and I've asked the friends around me that build much nicer looking boards than me what they would do and their advice, and this is something that I'm quite a lot happier with aesthetically. It kind of works. These are going to go kind of under at some point, and I need to kind of cable tie the stuff at the back, but for me this is, I can feel a lot less cluttered with this kind of board. So those are the things that I think it's worth thinking about, and the problems with pedal boards. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you for another video soon. Cheers.